My name is Lena, and I've been homeless on the streets for a long time. A sapphire necklace triggered memories of my former glamorous life, but before I knew it, I nearly dumped my food all over a millionaire. He was furious and repelled by me at first, but after a few chance encounters, he saw the real me, and then he began to pursue me. If you enjoy my story, be sure to follow along, and feel free to share your own stories in the comments. One night in New York, I huddled in the corner of the glass-walled building at 43rd Street on 5th Avenue, clutching a half-open box of salad discarded that afternoon by someone from the office tower. It still had the crisp crunch of fresh lettuce, way better than the stale bread I'd found the day before. Across the street, Tiffany's window glowed with warm yellow light, showcasing jewelry so sparkling it hurt my eyes. I stared transfixed at a sapphire necklace, when suddenly a asterisk crash asterisk echoed out. I had been jostled, and the cardboard box slipped from my arms. Salad spilled everywhere, lettuce leaves skittering toward a pair of polished Italian leather shoes. Sorry, I apologized on instinct, scrambling to pick it up. But just as my fingers brushed a leaf, a hand in a charcoal gray suit stopped me. Its knuckles were defined, and a wristwatch obviously worth a fortune glinted coldly under the street lamp. Stay away from my car. The man's voice was colder than the weather. He frowned, looking at me like I was something filthy. Your mess dirtied my tire. Following his gaze, I saw his black Bentley parked by the curb. One of my lettuce leaves was indeed stuck to its tire. Anger flared up inside me. Who hadn't had something blown away by the wind on New York streets? Did he have to treat me like I was a beggar? But I held back. After all, I had nowhere to shelter from the wind, and tangling with someone like him would only end badly for me. I'll clean it right away, I mumbled, fumbling in my pocket for a crumpled tissue one I'd found outside a Starbucks the day before. Still barely usable. I knelt down, carefully plucked the lettuce leaf, and tossed it into a nearby trash can. When I stood up, our eyes met. He was tallishly 6'3" with blonde hair gelled into perfect order. His face was expressionless, his eyes full of distance and impatience. I guessed he worked in this building, one of those elites in expensive suits and high heels who walked with purpose. They came and went, clutching coffee and papers, never sparing a glance for people like me huddled on street corners. Don't loiter around here again, he tossed over his shoulder before getting into the car. The door slammed shut with an asterisk thud, asterisk, sealing off two separate worlds. The Bentley's engine purred to life, gliding into traffic, and vanished within seconds. I stood there, staring at the squashed salad on the ground. My stomach rumbled with hunger. The man's gaze had felt like needles pricking at my heart, not painful, just stifling. I hadn't always been like this. I'd had an apartment, a job, everything I needed to live with dignity. Until 6 months ago, the company went bankrupt. My landlord evicted me. My wallet was stolen. My phone died and never turned back on. And finally, I lost my ID. That's how I'd ended up here, surviving on scraps, sleeping in subway tunnels or 24-hour McDonald's. The wind grew sharper. I pulled my faded old jacket tighter around me, a summer find from a thrift store, useless against New York's winter. I needed to find a warmer place to spend the night, or I might actually freeze to death here. I dragged my feet toward the subway, and as I passed the glass-walled building, I couldn't help but glance up. The top floor lights were still on. Maybe the suited man was still inside. I muttered, "Damn capitalist," under my breath before ducking into the subway entrance, where at least I'd be out of the wind. For the next few days, I avoided 5th Avenue. First, I feared running into that suited man again. Second, the dumpsters there had recently been claimed by a few other homeless people, making it hard to find anything edible. I shifted my territory to near Central Park coffee shops by the park entrance, threw out plenty of unsold sandwiches and pastries every day. On a good day, I might even find an unopened cup of hot cocoa. That afternoon, I was crouched beside a dumpster behind a coffee shop, rummaging for something to eat, when a voice suddenly barked, "Hey, what are you doing?" I jumped, nearly dropping the half-eaten sandwich in my hand. Turning around, I saw a security guard frowning at me. I stood up quickly, shoving the sandwich into my chest, and mumbled, "I'm sorry, I was just looking for something to eat. Dumpster diving's not allowed. Here, get lost." The guard snapped, waving me away impatiently. With no choice, I turned to leave. But before I'd gone far, I heard an argument break out behind me. Glancing back, I saw the guard yelling at a woman pushing a stroller. Apparently, she'd parked it in a no-parking zone. I didn't have the energy to care about others' problems. My stomach ached with hunger, and I just needed to find food. I wandered along the park path until I stopped by an abandoned flower bed. It was overgrown with weeds, but a few wild roses had stubbornly pushed through the cracks, their leaves wilted from the cold. Knelt down, staring at the roses, and a wave of sadness washed over me. They were just like me, struggling to survive, no matter how harsh the conditions. I reached out, gently pulling weeds from around the roses. Then fetched water from a nearby faucet. Someone had connected a hose, and it still dripped with lukewarm water, and poured it at the rose's roots. "What are you doing?" A familiar voice cut through the air. I froze, dropping the cup, and water splashed everywhere. Spinning around, there he was, the suited man. Today he wore a navy blue suit, no tie, with the top 2 buttons undone. He looked slightly more approachable than before, but his eyes were still cold. "I'm watering the flowers," I said, standing up and stepping back warily. I had no idea why he'd be here. Central Park wasn't exactly the kind of place I'd expect someone like him to frequent. He said nothing, walking over to the flower bed and glancing down at the wild roses I'd tended. After a moment he spoke. "The park's maintenance crew gave up on this bed over a year ago. It's been abandoned." "I know," I whispered, "but they're still alive. They don't deserve to just die." He looked up at me, his eyes losing some of their earlier impatience, replaced by something I couldn't read. "Do you come here often?" "Yeah, the past few days," I admitted, my heart racing. I had no idea what he wanted. He fell silent for a moment, then suddenly asked, "What's your name?" "Lena." I hesitated, then told him. It was my real name, even if no one had called it in a long time. "Lena," he repeated, then pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to me. "I'm Ethan Gray. Here's my contact information." I froze, unsure whether to take it. Why would a millionaire give a homeless person his business card? "Take it," Ethan said, his tone brooking no refusal. "Tomorrow morning at 9, come to the front desk of the building on 43rd Street, 5th Avenue. Ask for me." "What for?" I asked warily. We were from 2 completely different worlds. I couldn't imagine what he could want with me. "I have a job for you," Ethan said. "The garden downstairs at my company needs someone to tend to it." I stared at him dumbfounded. A job. I hadn't worked in 6 months, not since everything fell apart. I'd resigned myself to scavenging for scraps forever, sleeping in subway tunnels. But doubt crept in. Was this some kind of joke? Was he just messing with me? A way to amuse himself at the expense of a homeless woman? "I don't understand," I stammered. "Why me? I don't have an ID or any references." "You know how to care for plants?" Ethan cut me off, nodding at the roses. "That's all that matters right now. Think it over." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me clutching the business card. It felt heavy in my hand, like a lifeline, but one I was terrified to grab. After watching his figure disappear down the path, I unfolded the card. Ethan Gray, CEO, Gray Technologies. I'd heard of Gray Technologies, a Silicon Valley rising star specializing in AI and renewable energy, worth billions. I looked down at my tattered clothes and dusty shoes, then back at the card. My chest felt tight, a mix of hope and fear swirling inside me. Maybe this was my chance to climb out of the gutter, even if it was just a temporary job. Then, if he was only doing it out of pity, maybe it was worth taking. That night, I didn't sleep in the subway. Instead, I huddled in the entrance of a 24-hour laundromat, clutching Ethan's business card like it was a treasure. I kept replaying our conversation in my head, wondering if I was making a mistake. But when the first light of dawn broke, I made up my mind. I'd go. Whatever happened, it had to be better than sleeping on the streets. The next morning, I woke up early. I washed my face with cold water from a public fountain, brushed my hair as best I could with my fingers, and put on the cleanest shirt I had, still stained, but at least not torn. I arrived at the glass-walled building on 43rd Street at 8:50, my hands trembling as I clutched Ethan's business card. The building was even more imposing. Up close, its glass facade shimmered in the morning sun, and 2 uniformed security guards stood at the entrance, their expressions stern. Taking a deep breath, I walked in. The receptionist was a beautiful blonde woman. When she saw me, her smile faltered, surprise and disdain flickering across her face, though she quickly replaced it with a professional grin. "Good morning. How may I help you?" "I'm here to see Mr. Ethan Gray," I whispered, holding out the business card. "He told me to come at 9. The receptionist took the card, glanced at it, then looked me up and down, her confusion deepening. But she picked up the phone anyway, spoke softly for a moment, then hung up and smiled at me. "Mr. Gray is waiting for you on the 28th floor. You can take the elevator over there, turn left when you get out, and that's his office." "Thank you," I said, hurrying toward the elevator. I was the only one inside, and as the numbers climbed higher, my heart raced faster. The 28th floor, the top floor, with a view of all New York. And here I was, a homeless woman with no ID, about to walk into the CEO's office. When the elevator doors opened, I took another deep breath and stepped out. To the left stood a massive solid wood door, unmarked. I hesitated, then knocked. "Come in," Ethan's voice called from inside. I pushed the door open. The office was enormous. One entire wall was glass, overlooking 5th Avenue and Central Park in the distance. Ethan sat behind a huge desk, reading a document. He looked up, nodded at me and said, "Sit." I sat in the chair across from him. It was so soft that I felt utterly out of place. Everything in the office screamed wealth and sophistication, nothing like the world I knew. "You're well aware you don't meet our company's hiring criteria," Ethan said, cutting straight to the point. He set the document down and looked at me. No ID, no work history, not even a fixed address. My face burned with shame. I stared at the floor. He was right. I had nothing. "But I need someone to tend the garden downstairs," Ethan continued. "The previous gardener retired last month. The candidates we interviewed were either too expensive or looked down on the job. When I saw you tending those wild roses yesterday, I thought you might be able to do it." "I can do it." I looked up quickly, my voice firm. "I volunteered at a community garden before. I know how to care for plants, how to water them, fertilize them, prune them. I can do all of it." It was true before I became homeless. The apartment building I'd lived in had a small garden, and I'd spent hours there, tending to the flowers. It had been the happiest part of my days back then. Ethan nodded. "The pay is $18 an hour, weekly. 4 hours a day, 9 in the morning until 1 in the afternoon. Lunch is provided in the company cafeteria. $18 an hour felt like a fortune to me. I could barely contain my excitement. Thank you so much, Mr. Gray. I'll work hard, I promise." "One more thing," Ethan said, his tone serious. "While working at the company, you must follow our rules. No loitering around the building outside of work hours, no excessive contact with other employees, and under no circumstances are you to disclose your situation to anyone, including the fact that I hired you." My heart sank. So he was still afraid I'd embarrass him, afraid people would find out he'd hired a homeless woman. Of course, someone like him could never let anyone know he was associated with someone like me. "I understand," I whispered. Sadness lingered, but relief outweighed it. Regardless of his conditions, I had a job, an income. I wouldn't have to scavenge for food anymore. "Here's your uniform," Ethan said, taking a gray jumpsuit and a pair of rubber boots from a cabinet nearby. "Change in the restroom down the hall. Then the garden supervisor will show you what to do." "Okay," I said, picking up the uniform. I bowed slightly. "Thank you, Mr. Gray." He said nothing, returning to his document, as if I'd ceased to exist. I turned and walked out, my chest a mix of emotions. His conditions were harsh, his gaze still distant, but I was grateful. To him it might have been a small favor, but to me it was a lifeline. Changing into the jumpsuit made me feel slightly more at ease. The garden supervisor was a kind old man named Tom. He showed me around the garden, pointing out which flowers needed more water, which needed pruning, which needed pest control. The garden wasn't large, but tending to it was hard work. I labored from 9 until 1, sweating profusely, but my heart felt steady, for the first time in months. At noon, Tom took me to the employee cafeteria. It was spacious and elegantly decorated, filled with people in business attire. When we walked in, all eyes turned to us, curious, surprised, and some with thinly veiled disgust. I kept my head down, following Tom to a corner table, too embarrassed to look up. "Don't mind their stares," Tom said, handing me a tray with a sandwich, fruit, and a glass of milk. "They're just like that. Think they're better than everyone else. All you need to do is your job well. The rest doesn't matter." "Thank you, Tom," I whispered, touched. In the past 6 months, aside from a few kind homeless people I'd met, no one had treated me this way. I ate quickly, then returned to the garden to work. My shift ended at 1, but I stayed until 5, determined to prove myself to Ethan, to keep this job. When I left, Tom handed me my pay for the day, $72. My hands shook as I held the crisp bills. It was the first money I'd earned with my own hands in 6 months. It wasn't much, but it meant the world to me. As I walked out of the building, dusk was falling. I didn't leave right away, as Ethan had told me to. Instead, I sat on a street corner across from the building, watching the lights come on. The 28th floor was still lit. Ethan was probably still working. I silently mouthed thank you before turning and walking away. I needed to find a place to live, no more sleeping in the subway. With my first paycheck, my top priority was finding a home. Rent in New York was exorbitant. Devon, the cheapest apartments cost hundreds of dollars a month. After searching Brooklyn for days, I finally found a basement room in an old apartment building. It was tiny, just one room with no windows, only a vent, fan, but it was cheap, $300 a month, with a $100 security deposit. When I paid the landlord and took the key, I could barely hold back tears. It was the first place I could call my own in 6 months, even if it was just a cramped basement. I bought the bare essentials, a mattress, a blanket, a small table and chair, and some kitchenware. The space was Spartan, but as I looked around, I felt a sense of security I hadn't known in months. That night, I lay on the mattress, listening to the hum of the vent fan, and fell asleep quickly. It was the most peaceful sleep I'd had in half a year. In the days that followed, I showed up to work on time every morning. I poured my heart into tending the garden, caring for every flower as if it were my own. Before long, the garden was transformed, colorful blooms flourished everywhere, and even employees passing by would stop to admire them. Tom praised me often, and Ethan occasionally came down to check on things. He rarely spoke, but I could tell he was satisfied with my work. Once, Ethan arrived just as I was pruning a rose bush. It had grown tall and unruly, and I stood on my tiptoes, struggling to reach the dead branches at the top. Ethan walked over and stood silently beside me. I grew nervous. My hand slipping, I accidentally cut a branch that still had blooms on it. I'm so sorry. I apologized immediately, panicking that he'd be angry. But Ethan knelt down, picking up the branch and examining the roses. It's fine, he said. This branch was too dense anyway. Trimming it will do the plant good. He paused, then added, you seem to like roses. Yeah, I nodded, whispering. They're beautiful and tough. They can bloom no matter how harsh the conditions. Ethan looked at me, then turned and walked away without another word. I watched his back, confused. His tone had been softer than usual, his eyes lacking their usual distance. As days turned into weeks, the dynamic between Ethan and me slowly shifted. He no longer ignored me. Sometimes he'd stop in the garden too, chat asking about the flowers, or the weather, or trivial little things. Occasionally, he'd have the receptionist bring me a cup of hot coffee or a pastry, calling it a company perk. I knew I shouldn't harbor any unrealistic feelings. The gap between us was too vast, like stars in the sky and dust on the ground. We could never truly be together. But I couldn't help it. Every time I saw him, my heart fluttered. I knew it was ridiculous, so I kept those feelings buried deep inside, never daring to show them. One evening after work, I passed a flower shop. Its entrance was lined with rose-eyes, red, pink, white, all beautiful. I thought of Ethan, and before I knew it, I went inside and bought a single white rose with the money I'd saved. White roses symbolized purity and respect, just like my feelings for him, pure and humble. The next morning, I placed the white rose in a small glass vase and brought it to the garden. I didn't dare give it to Ethan directly, so I left the vase on a stone table in the corner, hoping he'd see it. That morning, Ethan did come down. He spotted the white rose on the table immediately, walking over and picking up the vase. I stood nearby, my heart racing, wondering what he'd think. He held the vase and walked over to me. Did you put this here? Yeah, I nodded, my face turning red. I thought it was beautiful. Adding it to the garden would make it nicer. Ethan stared at me, silent for a moment, then suddenly said, thank you, Lena. I looked up in shock, barely believing my ears. He'd said thank you, and he'd called me by my name. I met his eyes, and for the first time, they weren't cold. They held a hint of warmth. My heart raced, my face burning. You're welcome, Mr. Gray, I said quickly, looking away. Ethan said nothing more, turning and walking back to his office with the vase. I watched his back, my heart filled with a sweetness I hadn't felt in years. Maybe there was a chance for us. But the thought vanished as soon as it appeared. Don't be silly, Lena. He was just touched in the moment. You and him are from two different worlds. In the days that followed, Ethan came down to check on the white rose every day, and we'd chat occasionally about the garden, about plants, about New York's weather, even about trivial nonsense. The distance between us seemed to shrink, the coldness fading away. Then, the company held a charity gala in the building's ballroom. That night, the entire building was decorated lavishly, and employees arrived in formal gowns and suits, all glamorous and radiant. I stayed late to tend to the garden, so I was still on site when the gala began. As I worked in the garden, I could hear laughter and music drifting from the ballroom. Suddenly, Ethan walked out. He wore a black suit and tie, even more handsome than usual. He saw me and walked over. Lena, are you free tonight? I froze, confused. I have nothing to do after work. Then, would you accompany me to the gala? Ethan asked, his eyes serious. I was dumbfounded, unable to speak. Attend the charity gala, with all those elites in formal wear. I looked down at my work uniform, then at his suit, and shook my head. I can't. I don't have anything appropriate to wear, and I don't know the etiquette. I'd embarrass you. It's fine, Ethan said. I had my assistant prepare clothes for you there in my office. And as for etiquette, don't worry about it. Just stay with me. I hesitated, torn between excitement and fear. I wanted to go with him, but I was terrified of making a fool of myself, of being mocked. Trust me, Ethan said, his eyes steady. You won't embarrass me. In his gaze, I saw trust. Taking a deep breath, I nodded. Okay, I'll go change. Ethan's assistant had prepared a light blue dress that fit me perfectly, enhancing my pale skin. There were also a pair of heels and a small clutch. I changed in the restroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror, barely recognizing myself. For the first time in 6 months, I looked like a normal person, dressed with dignity. When I walked out, Ethan was waiting for me. His eyes lit up when he saw me. "You look beautiful." My face turned red. "Thank you." Ethan held out his hand. "Shall we go?" I hesitated, then placed my hand in his. His hand was warm and strong, and holding it made me feel safe. As we walked into the ballroom, all eyes turned to us, surprised, curious, and some filled with unkind scrutiny. My palms sweated, and I clung tightly to Ethan's hand. Ethan sensed my nervousness, patting my hand gently and whispering in my ear, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." His words calmed me slightly. He led me around, introducing me to his business partners and friends. "This is Lena, a friend of mine." The words "a friend" warmed my heart. Even if it was just politeness, I was happy. Midway through the gala, a woman in a red gown walked over to us. She was beautiful and elegant, clearly from a wealthy background. She smiled at Ethan. "Ethan, who is this lady? I've never seen her before." "This is Lena," Ethan introduced her. "Lena, this is Emily, my business partner." "Hello, Lena," Emily said, extending her hand with a sweet smile, but her eyes held a hint of scrutiny. "What do you do?" I froze, unsure how to answer. Should I say I was the gardener, or admit I was homeless? Ethan sensed my awkwardness and stepped in. "Lena helps me tend the garden at the company. She's very talented. She's transformed the entire space." Emily's expression cleared, and a flicker of disdain crossed her face, though she quickly masked it. "I see," she said. "Ethan, you're so charitable bringing even the gardener to such an important gala." Her words felt like a needle in my heart. I knew what she meant. I was just a gardener, someone who didn't belong here, someone beneath Ethan. I couldn't take it anymore. Pulling my hand away from Ethan's, I said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Gray. I'm not feeling well. I'll head back first." I turned and ran, ignoring Ethan calling after me. I rushed out of the building and into the cold night, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. I'd been fooling myself. I and Ethan were from two different worlds. Forcing my way into his world only made me look ridiculous. Back in the basement, I took off the light blue dress and tossed it aside. Staring at my reflection in the mirror wearing ragged clothes, my face palely felt overwhelming despair. Maybe I was destined to stay at the bottom forever, never to have unrealistic dreams. The next day, I didn't go to work. I was too afraid to see Ethan, afraid of the strange looks from the other employees. Afraid of hearing more words like Emily's, I curled up on the mattress in the basement all day. Not eating, my mind replaying the gala, Emily's disdainful gaze. That afternoon, someone knocked on the door. I thought it was the landlord, but when I opened it, it was Ethan. He wore casual clothes, no longer the stern CEO. He looked tired, even haggard. "Why didn't you come to work?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. I'm not feeling well," I said, staring at the floor. Ethan walked in, glancing around the cramped basement. His eyebrows furrowed. "Is this where you live?" I nodded, my face burning with shame. I didn't want him to see me like this, to know how squalid my life was. "Lena, I'm sorry about what happened last night," Ethan said, walking over to me. His eyes were sincere. "Don't take Emily's words to heart. She's just like, that speaks without thinking. It's not her fault." I looked up at him, tears welling in my eyes. "It's mine. I shouldn't have gone to the gala, shouldn't have deluded myself into thinking we could be friends. You and I are from two different worlds. I'm homeless, a gardener, and you, a millionaire, a CEO. The gap between us is too big, like heaven and earth. We'll never be together." "Lena, that's not true," Ethan said, grabbing my hand tightly. "I never looked down on you because of your background. To me, you're kind, strong, and talented, all far more important than status or wealth. I see you as a friend, and even more." He trailed off, his eyes filled with hesitation and conflict. "Even more?" I asked, my heart pounding with a mix of hope and fear. Ethan took a deep breath, as if making up his mind. "Even more, like you, Lena. Ever since I first saw you tending those wild roses in Central Park, I've been drawn to you. The tenacity you have, your love for life. I've never seen that in anyone else." My heart stopped. He liked me. A millionaire like the homeless woman. It felt too surreal, like a dream. "Is this true?" I asked, my voice shaking. "It's true," Ethan nodded, his eyes serious. "Lena, I know there's a huge gap between us, but I don't care. I want to be with you. I want to give you a better life, to protect you, to never let you suffer again." Tears finally spilled down my cheeks this time, tears of happiness. I threw my arms around him, clinging tightly to his warm embrace. "Ethan, I like you too. Ever since you gave me the job, since you smiled at me for the first time, I've liked you. But I never dared say anything, afraid you'd look down on me, afraid the gap between us was too wide." "Silly girl," Ethan said, patting my back gently. His voice was soft. You don't have to be afraid anymore. I'm here. That afternoon, Ethan stayed in my basement for a long time. He bought me food, chatted with me, listened as I told him about the past 6 months, about my old life. He didn't show disgust or impatience. He just listened carefully, comforting me occasionally. From that day on, we were together. Ethan moved me out of the basement and rented me a small apartment in Manhattan. It wasn't big, but it was cozy, with windows that let in sunlight. He bought me new clothes, encouraged me to study and improve myself. He said he didn't want anyone to think I was unworthy of him. He wanted me to become a better version of myself, someone who could stand beside him. I studied hard, attending community college during the day and waiting for Ethan to come home at night. Ethan was busy, but he always made time for me, taking me to movies, trying new restaurants, walking in the park. We were like any other couple, living a sweet, happy life. Word of our relationship spread quickly in the company. Many people gossiped behind my back, saying I was only with Ethan for his money, but I didn't care. As long as Ethan trusted me, as long as we were together, their words meant nothing. Ethan defended me fiercely. Whenever someone spoke ill of me in front of him, he'd shut them down without mercy. He even introduced me to his family. At first, his parents disapproved, thinking I was too lowborn, but with Ethan's persistence, they gradually accepted me, thought this happiness would last forever, that I'd finally escaped my past and found my place in the world. But I was wrong. It was all just an illusion, a beautiful dream that would soon shatter. It was my birthday, and Ethan said he had a surprise for me. He told me to wait for him at the street corner where we'd first met, at 7 that evening. I arrived half an hour early, wearing a new dress Ethan had bought me, my heart filled with anticipation. At 7, Ethan arrived. He was driving his black Bentley, holding a bouquet of white roses, just like the one I'd given him. He smiled as he got out of the car, handing me the flowers. "Happy birthday, Lena." "Thank you, Ethan," I said, taking the roses, my heart full of joy. "Get in," he said, opening the car door. "I'm taking you somewhere." I nodded and got in. The Bentley glided smoothly through the streets, finally stopping in front of a luxurious villa. It was huge, with a sprawling garden around it, magnificent and imposing. "Where is this?" I asked, confused. "This is my home," Ethan said, smiling. "I wanted you to see it. From now on, it's yours too." I froze, touched and excited. He'd brought me to his home, called it mine too. Did that mean he wanted to spend the rest of his life with me? Ethan led me inside. The interior was even more luxurious than I'd imagined. He showed me every room, finally stopping at a door on the second floor. "This is the room I prepared for you. Do you like it?" I pushed the door open. The room was spacious, with the huge floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the garden. The furniture was brand new, and there was a large walk-in closet filled with clothes and shoes of all kinds. "Ethan, it's beautiful." "Thank you," I said, turning to hug him. My heart was overflowing with happiness. "As long as you like it," Ethan said, hugging me back. He whispered in my ear, "Lena, I love you." "I love you too, Ethan," I said, looking up and kissing him. We were lost in the kiss when the door suddenly swung open. I jumped, pulling away from Ethan. Turning around, I saw Ethan's mother standing in the doorway, her face livid. "Ethan, what are you doing?" she snapped, her eyes filled with anger and disappointment. "You brought her into our home? You let her stay here? Have you forgotten your engagement to Emily?" "Engagement?" I froze, staring at Ethan. "Ethan, is this true? Are you engaged to Emily?" Ethan's face turned pale. He looked at his mother, then at me, opening his mouth, but unable to speak. "Of course it's true." Ethan's mother walked over to us, pointing at me. "Ethan, snap out of it. You're the heir to the Gray family. You must marry Emily. This was decided long ago. How could you be with someone like her? She's homeless. A liar, she's only after our money." "That's not true," I said quickly. "Ma'am, I'm not after his money. I truly love Ethan." "Shut up," Ethan's mother shouted, cutting me off. "You have no right to speak here. I've seen women like you 100 times. Get away from my son. Get out of here, otherwise I'll make you regret it." I looked at Ethan, hoping he'd speak up for me, hoping he'd tell his mother we loved each other, that he wasn't engaged to Emily. But Ethan just stood there, head bowed, saying nothing. My heart sank, icy cold. "Ethan," I said, my voice soft and trembling, "is what she said true? Are you really engaged to Emily? Have you been lying to me this whole time?" Ethan finally looked up, his eyes filled with guilt and pain. "Lena, I'm sorry," he whispered. "The engagement to Emily was arranged by my parents. I've been trying to call it off, but I haven't had the chance. I didn't mean to lie to you. I just liked you so much. I was afraid of losing you." "Haven't had the chance?" I laughed bitterly. "So you just kept it from me. Let me act like a fool, immersed in your lies." Do you think that because I'm homeless, I'll just take whatever you throw at me without fighting back? No, Lena, listen to me. Ethan reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I don't need your explanations, I said, tears streaming down my face. I don't need your time. It's over between us. I turned and ran, ignoring Ethan calling after me. I fled the villa and into the cold night, still clutching the bouquet of white roses. The petals fell off in the wind, scattered on the ground like my broken heart. I didn't go back to the apartment Ethan had rented for me, nor did I return to the basement. I had no idea where to go, so I wandered aimlessly through the streets. New York's night was cold, the wind sharp, but I felt nothing. The pain in my heart had numbed everything else. I had once thought Ethan was the light in my life, my savior. But now I realized he was just a selfish liar. All the happiness he'd given me was just an elaborate trick. I wandered the streets for days, back to the life I'd lived 6 months earlier. But this time, I was even more desperate. Before, I'd only suffered physical hardship. Now, my heart was shattered. Ethan's betrayal was like a knife, cutting me to the core. One day I fell asleep on a park bench. When I woke up, I found a coat draped over me. Looking up, I saw Tom. He held a sandwich and a cup of hot coffee, handing them to me. Lena, where have you been these past few days? Mr. Ethan has been looking everywhere for you. He's beside himself. I took the coffee, sipping it. The warmth spread through my body, but it couldn't reach my heart. I don't want to see him, I whispered. Lena, I know you're hurt, Tom said, sitting down beside me. He sighed. But Mr. Ethan truly cares about you. His engagement to Miss Emily was indeed arranged by his parents. He's always opposed it. These past few days, he's fought with his parents, canceled all his work, and searched everywhere for you. So what? I looked at Tom, tears falling. He lied to me. That's a fact. He knew he was engaged, but he still pursued me, still said he liked me. Isn't that deception? He was just too afraid of losing you, Tom said. Lena, people make mistakes, especially in love. Mr. Ethan was wrong, but he knows it now and he's trying to make it right. Can't you give him a chance? I fell silent. Tom's words made me waver. I still liked Ethan. I couldn't forget the happy times we'd shared. But how could I forgive his lies so easily? I'll think about it, I told Tom. Tom nodded. Good. Mr. Ethan asked me to tell you whatever decision you make, he'll respect it. But he hopes you'll give him a chance to explain, a chance to make amends. He's waiting for you in the company garden. If you're willing to see him, go find him there. With that, Tom left. I sat on the bench staring at the coffee in my hand, torn. Should I see him? Should I forgive him? After thinking for a long time, I decided to go. No matter what, I needed to hear his explanation, to give myself closure, and to give him one last chance. I went to the company garden, and sure enough, Ethan was there. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot. Stubble covered his chin, and he'd lost the air of confidence he usually carried. When he saw me, his eyes lit up, and he hurried over. Lena, you finally agreed to see me. I'm not here to listen to your apologies, I said, my voice cold. I'm here to hear your explanation. Okay, Ethan nodded, his voice serious. My engagement to Emily was arranged when I was 18. My parents and hers are business partners, and they wanted to strengthen their alliance through marriage. I've always opposed it, fought with my parents about it for years, but they refused to call it off. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Because I was afraid of losing you, Ethan said, looking at me. His eyes were filled with pain. From the first time I saw you, I was drawn to you. The days I spent with you were the happiest of my life. I was terrified that if I told you about the engagement, you'd leave me. So I kept it from you, hoping to call it off first, then tell you the truth. I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have lied to you. Couldn't have made you suffer like this. Lena, I'm sorry, truly sorry. Do you know what hurt me the most? I asked, tears falling. It's not the engagement. It's that you saw me as someone fragile, someone who couldn't handle the truth. You thought I'd leave you because of your engagement, that I cared about your status and wealth. But you were wrong, Ethan. What I cared about was your honesty, your sincerity. If you'd have told me the truth from the start, I would have stood with you, helped you fight your parents. But you chose to lie. That's what disappointed me. I know I was wrong, Ethan said, grabbing my hand tightly. Lena, give me another chance. I've already had it out with my parents. If they refuse to let me call off the engagement, I'll give up my inheritance, walk away from everything. I don't care about the family fortune or the company. All I care about is you. I'll prove to you with my actions that my feelings for you are real. Looking at his haggard face, his eyes full of pain and sincerity, my heart softened. I knew he'd made a mistake, but he'd also paid for it. And deep down, I still loved him. Maybe he deserved one more chance. I can give you a chance, I said, looking at him seriously. But I won't forgive you right away. I need time to process this. to learn to trust you again. In that time, you have to prove to me that you truly want to be with me, not just on a whim. Ethan's eyes lit up. He pulled me into a tight hug. Thank you, Lena. Thank you for giving me this chance. I'll prove it to you, I promise. From that day on, Ethan began to prove his sincerity with actions. He moved out of his parents' house, cut off financial support from his family, and rented a small apartment on his own. He turned down all unnecessary social events, coming home on time every night to cook for me, to chat with me. He even accompanied me to community college, helping me study. He also continued to negotiate with his parents and Emily, determined to call off the engagement. At first, Emily was furious. She even came to see me, threatening me to leave Ethan, but I didn't back down. I told her that Ethan and I loved each other, and I wouldn't leave him. When Emily saw how determined I was, and how much Ethan cared for me, she finally gave up. Ethan's parents were stubborn at first, but when they saw that Ethan was willing to give up everything, his inheritance, his comfortable life just to be with me, they finally relented. They agreed to let Ethan end the engagement, though they still didn't fully accept me, saying they'd never recognize me as their daughter-in-law. Ethan was furious, saying he'd cut ties with his parents, but I stopped him. I told him I didn't need their approval. As long as he loved me, that was enough, and I believed that with time, they'd come to accept me. With Ethan's support and my own hard work, I graduated from community college. I'd studied landscape design, and after graduation, I found a job as a landscape designer. The pay wasn't high, but I loved it. Finally, I could support myself with my own hands, living with dignity. Ethan and I slowly rebuilt our relationship, returning to the sweetness we'd shared before. We worked hard together, striving for our future. Our lives weren't as wealthy as before, but we were happy. One day, Ethan took me to a large empty lot surrounded by roses. He looked at me and smiled. Lena, I bought this with the money I've saved over the past few months. I want to build a garden, here our garden. We can plant all kinds of flowers, live here together, like in a fairy tale. I looked at him, tears streaming down my face. This was my lifelong dream, to have a garden of my own, to live with the person I loved, and Ethan had made it come true. Thank you, Ethan, I said, hugging him tightly. My heart was full of happiness. Silly girl, Ethan said, hugging me back. He whispered in my ear, Lena, I love you forever. I love you too, Ethan. The sun shone down on us, warm and bright. The roses around us bloomed brilliantly, like our love weathered by storms, but finally blooming into something beautiful. I knew we'd face more difficulties in the future, but as long as we were together, as long as we loved each other, nothing could break us. I'd once been ashes, a weed ignored by the world. But because of Ethan, I'd become stardust, a beautiful rose in the garden. I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of our happy life together. The day we officially started building the garden, it rained lightly in New York. Mud clung to the soles of our shoes as I squatted at the edge of the lot, watching Ethan argue with the construction crew foreman. His collar was soaked through, nothing like the immaculate man I'd first met, the one who'd frowned at a single lettuce leaf on his tire. Now he bickered for 10 minutes over a few dollars difference in building materials. Quit arguing with him, I said, tugging at his sleeve. In my hand, I clutched a wild rose sapling I'd transplanted from Central Park, its roots wrapped in damp soil. I asked Tom yesterday. He knows an old carpenter who can build the trellises for half the crew's price. Ethan turned to look at me, his eyes a mix of frustration and affection. Why didn't you say so earlier? I've been yelling until my throat hurts. Because I wanted to give you a chance to be a bargain hunter, I joked, handing him the sapling. Look, it's still alive. When we plant it by the gate, we'll see it every time we walk in. He took the sapling, holding it carefully as if it were a treasure. Fine, whatever you say. You pick where to plant it. You pick who to hire. I'm all yours. I knew he was struggling. Once, he could have summoned the best team in the city with a single phone call. Now he haggled with laborers, compared prices for fertilizer at 3 different supermarkets. To be with me, he'd left behind everything: his family's wealth, his privileged life. The money in his bank account came from freelance work he'd taken on recently. He hadn't asked his parents for a cent, but the challenges were bigger than we'd expected. 3 weeks into construction, the carpenter suddenly quit, complaining we weren't paying him enough, and that the work required too many revisions. I was at my studio revising design plans when Ethan called, his voice hoarse. Lena, the carpenter, left the half-finished trellises and walked out. I offered him more money, but he still refused. I'll be right there, I said, grabbing my bag and rushing out. My studio was only 2 blocks from the garden. When I arrived, I found Ethan squatting beside a pile of wood, his hair messy, a half-hammered plank in his hand. I walked over and squatted next to him, ignoring the carpenter's mess. Instead, I pointed at the freshly turned soil nearby. Look, the flower seeds we planted yesterday are sprouting. He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. Am I useless? I can't even get a simple trellis built. What are you talking about? I patted the back of his hand. There was a small cut on it, probably from a nail. We're not the kind of people who throw money at problems. We'll take our time. Remember how I used to scavenge for sandwiches in the park? No matter how hard things get, we'll get through it. That night, we didn't hire a new carpenter. I dug out the notes from the woodworking class I'd taken at community college, and Ethan went to the hardware store to buy a new hammer and nails. We sat in the empty lot under the streetlight, piecing together the trellises, one plank at a time. He was clumsy, hammering nails crookedly more than once, his fingertips swollen. I held his hand, guiding him. Aim carefully like you're signing an important contract. Don't rush. He looked down at me and suddenly smiled. Lena, even if I have 2 hammer nails every day for the rest of my life, it's happier than sitting through a board meeting. My heart melted, but I teased him anyway. Don't regret it later. When the garden's done, you'll have to water and fertilize all the plants. No regrets, he said immediately, like a dog eager to please. But just a few days later, a bigger problem arrived. I was planting roses in the garden when a black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, and Ethan's mother stared at me, her face like she was looking at garbage. She was wearing a Chanel suit and sunglasses. Miss Lena, can we talk? I froze, my trowel hovering in midair. I didn't look up. I have nothing to say to you. I know you don't want to see me, but I'm doing this for Ethan's good, she said, pushing open the car door. Her high heels sank into the mud with a squelch. He's living in this squalor for you, too ashamed to even step foot in the family business. Don't you feel guilty? Guilty? I finally looked up, mud still on my hands. When you forced him to get engaged to Emily, did you feel guilty? Whether Ethan is happy or not isn't up to you, it's his choice. He's been tricked by you, she shouted. You're only after his money. Now that he's broke, why are you still clinging to him? I'll give you $500,000. Leave him and never show your face again. She pulled a check from her bag and held it out to me. Looking at it, I suddenly laughed. Where was this $500,000 when I was scavenging for salad on Fifth Avenue? Now that I was earning my own living, she thought I was after their money. I didn't take the check. Instead, I tossed the mud from my hands onto the ground. You'd better keep your money. I may have been poor, but I've never sold my feelings. If Ethan wants to leave, he'll tell me himself. If he doesn't, not even $1 million would make me go. Just then, Ethan rode up on his second-hand electric bike, the one he'd bought to save on transportation costs. A bag of tomatoes and eggs sat in the basket. When he saw his mother, his face darkened. He parked the bike and stepped in front of me, shielding me. Mom, what are you doing here? I'm here to save you, his mother snapped, pointing at me. Ethan, look at her covered in mud, like a beggar. Being with her will ruin you. She's not a beggar, Ethan said, his voice loud enough for passersby to stop and stare. She's my girlfriend, the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with. If you keep harassing her, I'll never call you mom again. His mother froze, shocked. She'd never seen her obedient son talk to her like this. She looked at Ethan, then at me, crumpling the check and throwing it on the ground. Fine, fine. Don't come crying to me later. She stormed back to her car and drove away. Ethan turned to me, quickly taking my hands. Did she hurt you? Say anything mean? No, I shook my head, smiling at his worried expression. She just offered me a check to leave you. You didn't take it right? He asked, anxiety in his eyes. What do you think? I joked, pinching his cheek. If I had, would I still be here planting roses with you? He relaxed, pulling me into a hug. Thank God you stayed. Lena, I'm sorry. You shouldn't have to put up with this. It's okay, I said, leaning against his chest. I could smell the faint scent of mud on him, far nicer than the cologne he used to wear. As long as you're on my side, I can handle anything. That night, we cooked tomato and egg noodles in the garden, eating them under the half-finished trellis. The streetlight cast a warm glow over us, and the wild rose sapling had already sprouted new leaves. I suddenly felt fearless. No matter what troubles came next, as long as we were together, we'd overcome them. When the garden was half finished, my landscape design studio landed its first big project. Coffee Chain was opening 5 new locations across the city, each needing a small garden. The manager loved my wild rose nook design, saying it perfectly matched their urban healing theme. I was watering roses in the garden when I got the call. My hands shook, and the watering can slipped from my grasp. Ethan ran over. What's wrong? Did you burn yourself? No, I said, grabbing his arm. My voice trembled. I got the big project. 5 coffee shops, 5 gardens. He stared at me for a moment, then lifted me into the air, spinning me around. Really? That's amazing. I knew you could do it, but my excitement faded a few days later. The coffee shop manager called saying he wanted to meet in person and that an important person wanted to review the designs. I assumed it was the coffee shop owner, so I put on a new dress I'd bought, a arriving half an hour early at the agreed cafe. When I pushed open the door, I found not just the manager, but someone I'd hoped never to see again. Emily. She was wearing a business suit, sitting on the sofa with my design plans in her hand, a sneer on her face. Lena, I didn't expect you to be so successful, ending such a big project. Greenview Landscaping, the name hit me like a punch to the gut. That was the company I'd worked for before becoming homeless, the place where my life had fallen apart. In 6 short months, it had collapsed, leaving me jobless, homeless, and eventually I'd always thought it was bad luck, but Emily's sudden appearance, the guilt in her eyes, made my stomach twist. Emily, what are you doing here? I asked, standing my ground. I'm one of the investors in the coffee chain, she said, tossing the design plans onto the table. I heard the new designer was talented, so I wanted to see for myself. Imagine my surprise when it turned out to be you. The manager looked awkward, trying to smooth things over. Ms. Lena, Ms. Emily, is our investor. She has a say in the garden project. I see, I said, walking over to the table. So you're here to sabotage me? Emily's smile faded. I'm here to ensure the project is up to standard. Your design has flaws. You want to plant wild roses at the cafe entrance? They have thorns. What if they hurt customers? And you're using reclaimed wood for the benches. What if there are bugs? It'll ruin the cafe's image. Her words were clearly meant to pick apart my work. The manager shifted uncomfortably, wanting to speak but staying quiet. I took a deep breath, picking up the design plans and pointing to the sections she'd criticized. Ms. Emily, the wild roses will be surrounded by transparent barriers. They won't affect the aesthetic, but they'll keep customers safe. As for the reclaimed wood, I've already treated it for pests. It's also more eco-friendly, which aligns with the cafe's healing theme. All these details are in the notes. If you'd bothered to read them, I wouldn't have to explain. Emily looked stunned that I'd stood up to her. She recovered quickly, saying, even if those issues are fixed, do you have the experience? 5 gardens, what if something goes wrong? You should step down now before you embarrass yourself. My experience isn't up to you to judge, I said, closing the plans and setting them on the table. You saw how well I tended the garden at Gray Technologies. The employees can attest to that. If you think I'm unqualified, feel free to hire another designer, but don't come here to pick fights. Just then, the cafe door opened again. Ethan walked in holding a folder. He walked over to me, placing the folder on the table. These are Lena's previous project reports, photos of the Gray Technologies garden, reviews from the community garden. If you'd like to check her credentials, feel free. Emily's face paled when she saw Ethan. What are you doing here? I'm Lena's assistant, he said, his voice cold. She took the project, so I'm helping her prepare materials. And Emily, if you want to invest in the coffee chain, do your job as an investor. Don't bring personal grudges into work. When you ended the engagement, you said we'd go our separate ways. So why are you harassing Lena? Emily's face turned red and white. She couldn't find words to respond. The manager jumped in, trying to diffuse the tension. It's all a misunderstanding. Ms. Lena's design is excellent. We'd love to work with you. Is that so? I said, looking at the manager, then at Emily. If Ms. Emily disagrees, I think we should call off the cooperation. I don't want to deal with unnecessary trouble later. I agree, Emily said quickly. I was just looking over the plans, no other reason. You two should proceed with the cooperation. Don't waste any more time. I knew she was backing down to avoid further embarrassment. I didn't push it, picking up the design plans and signing the contract with the manager. When we walked out of the cafe, Ethan took my hand and whispered, "Did she scare you?" "No," I said, smiling. "With you here, I'm not afraid of anything. By the way, how did you know I was in trouble?" "I called you, but the manager answered. He mentioned Emily was here, so I rushed over," he said, squeezing my hand tighter. "From now on, don't handle things alone. Call me, and I'll be there right away." That night, we celebrated at my studio, just a small cake with 2 candles. Looking at Ethan, I felt overwhelming happiness. When I'd been eating stale bread in the subway, I'd never imagined someone would fight the world for me. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into the coffee shop garden project. Ethan came to help me every day after work, carrying flower pots, sawing wood, painting benches. Sometimes I'd fall asleep at my desk from exhaustion, and he'd carry me to the sofa, cover me with a blanket, and continue revising design plans for me. Once I woke up in the middle of the night to find him still working under the desk lamp, his eyes bloodshot. I walked over and hugged him from behind. "Stop working, you can finish it tomorrow." "It's okay," he said, turning to me and touching my face. "Your gardens are so beautiful. I want to help you make them perfect. I don't want to let you down." Tears pricked my eyes. I didn't care about wealth or status anymore. All I wanted was to work alongside him every day, to eat together, to watch the flowers bloom together. That was enough. When the coffee shop garden project was completed, the manager gave me a silk banner that read Urban Healer. I hung it on the wall of my studio, staring at it with pride. I'd earned this with my own hands. Not through Ethan, not through anyone else. Ethan was even happier than I was. He took me to our garden, which was now fully finished. Wild roses bloomed brilliantly, and roses, lilies, sunflowers, all kinds of flowers crowded together, like a sea of color. Morning glories climbed up the trellis by the gate, rustling in the wind. Lena, look, he said, pulling me to the center of the garden. There was a small wooden platform, something he'd had built secretly. He pulled a small box from his pocket, dropping to one knee. His eyes sparkled. Lena, I know I've made many mistakes. I lied to you, hurt you, but I've changed. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, waking up to see you every morning, watching the stars with you every night. Will you marry me? I looked at him, tears streaming down my face. When I'd been scavenging for salad on Fifth Avenue, I'd never imagined someone would propose to me in a garden filled with flowers. Yes, I nodded eagerly. He slipped a simple silver ring onto my finger, no diamonds, but more beautiful than any jewelry I'd ever seen. We didn't have a grand wedding. We invited Tom, the coffee shop manager, and a few classmates from community college. We held a small ceremony in our garden. Tom was our officiant, his voice shaking as he spoke. When I first met Lena, she was scavenging for sandwiches behind a coffee shop. Now she has her own studio, and such a wonderful husband. I'm so happy for her. Ethan's parents didn't come, but his sister did. She secretly gave me a red envelope, whispering, "My parents are just stubborn. They don't oppose you anymore, they're just too proud to admit it. I'll bring them to see your garden soon." I smiled and nodded, my heart warm. I'd long since forgiven Ethan's parents. They loved their son and were just afraid he'd suffer. The wedding day was perfect. The sun shone brightly, and all the flowers bloomed. Ethan held my hand as we walked through the garden. The wind carried the scent of flowers, and I felt happy. He looked down at me and smiled. "Lena, do you know? My old life was a joke. Board meetings, family business, none of it made me happy. This, right here, is happiness. Don't regret it later," I teased, pinching his cheek. "I'll never regret it," he said, lifting me into the air and spinning me around. "Being with you is the best decision I've ever made." That night, after our guests left, we sat on the swing in the garden, watching the stars. Ethan held me in his arms, and I rested my head on his chest, twisting the silver ring on my finger. "Remember our first meeting?" I asked suddenly. "Of course," he laughed. "You were scavenging for salad on Fifth Avenue. I bumped into you, and I yelled at you for getting lettuce on my tire. I called you a damn capitalist in my head," I said, laughing too. "You don't call me that anymore?" he asked, pinching my nose. "No," I shook my head. "Now I think this capitalist is pretty cute." He bent down and kissed my forehead. The garden was filled with blooming flowers, and the stars shone brightly above. I suddenly realized all the pain I'd endured had been worth it. I'd once been homeless, scavenging for food on New York streets, sleeping in subway tunnels. Now I had my own studio, my own garden, and a husband who loved me. Life is like the wild roses we planted, Avon. If it grows in cracks, even if it's battered by wind and rain, as long as you don't give up, it will bloom beautifully. 2 years after we married, our garden became known as New York's healing garden. People came from all over, some to take photos, some to find solace, some to ask me for gardening advice. I started a small weekly class in the garden, teaching people how to grow flowers every Saturday afternoon. Ethan would serve tea and snacks, and sometimes he'd share funny stories about his past life, like the time he'd hammered a nail into his hand while building our first trellis. One day, Ethan's parents showed up unexpectedly. His mother was wearing casual clothes, no sunglasses, and she looked much softer than before. She walked into the garden, staring at the blooming wild roses. "These flowers look just like the ones you tended in Central Park all those years ago." I froze, surprised she remembered. "They are. I transplanted them here. They're doing much better now." Ethan's father walked over to him, patting his shoulder. "You look happier than you ever were at the company." Ethan smiled. "I told you I didn't want to inherit the business. I wanted to live a life I loved. I was too stubborn before," his father sighed. "I always thought you should live a rich man's life, but I forgot what you really wanted. Now that I see how happy you and Lena are, I'm relieved." That noon we ate together in the garden. Ethan's mother even helped me wash dishes, saying, "Lena, I was wrong before. I was too harsh on you. I hope you can forgive me." "It's okay," I said, smiling. "That's all in the past." I'd truly forgiven her. Everyone has their obsessions, and she'd only been trying to protect her son. Now that she'd accepted me, I was happy. A year later, I gave birth to a baby girl. We named her Rosie after the roses. Ethan was overprotective, refusing to let me do any heavy work. Once, I tried to move a flower pot secretly, and he panicked. Lena, be careful. What if you hurt the baby? I just wanted to stretch my legs, I said, laughing. No way, he said, helping me to a chair and covering me with a blanket. You sit here and rest. I'll do all the work. From now on, you just need to take care of yourself. Watching him rush around, I felt incredibly happy. When I'd been wandering the streets of New York, the world had felt huge and cold. Now, with a home, a husband, and a baby on the way, it felt small and warm. The day Rosie was born, Ethan held her in his arms, tears in his eyes. Lena, look at her, she has your eyes. She's so beautiful. I looked at them, my heart full of love. When we took Rosie home from the hospital, we carried her into the garden. The sun shone on her tiny face, and she gurgled happily. The wild roses bloomed in nearby, as if welcoming her. Tom came too, bringing a small wooden cradle he'd made by hand, carved with the words, Wild Rose Baby. Lena, he said, smiling. When Rosie grows up, she'll love flowers too. I'll teach her how to garden. Sounds perfect, I said, nodding. Time flew by, and Rosie turned 3. She ran around the garden every day, chasing butterflies, picking small flowers, and sometimes helping me water the plants though. Most of the time, she just got herself soaked. Every day when Ethan came home from work, he'd pick her up first. Then they'd hunt for treasures in the garden, small candies I'd hidden. One night, after Rosie fell asleep, Ethan and I sat on the swing in the garden, watching the stars. He held me in his arms, whispering, Lena, do you know? The best decision I ever made was giving you that business card. If I hadn't, I'd still be stuck in those endless board meetings, living a life with no joy. Me too, I said, leaning against his chest. If I hadn't tended those wild roses in Central Park, if I hadn't met you, I'd still be homeless. The wind blew, carrying the scent of flowers. Rosie slept soundly inside. Looking at Ethan, at the garden full of blooms, I realized how magical life was. It had given me the darkest of days, but just when I despaired, it had given me the brightest light. On Rosie's 4th birthday, we held a small party in the garden. Tom brought a wooden swing he'd made for her, and Ethan's parents came too. His mother had knitted Rosie a pink sweater, and Rosie ran through the flowers wearing it, like a little butterfly. As the evening fell and most guests left, I squatted by the flower bed to clean up balloons. Suddenly, someone called my name. Turning around, I saw a man in a suit around 50, with an apologetic expression. Ms. Lena, do you remember me? I'm Joe, from Greenview Landscaping. Greenview Landscaping, the name felt like a needle in my heart. That was the company I'd worked for before becoming homeless. The place where my life had unraveled. The company had collapsed suddenly in 6 months, leaving me jobless, then homeless, then I'd always thought it was bad luck. But Joe's sudden appearance, the guilt in his eyes, made my stomach clench. Mr. Joe, what are you doing here? I stood up, dropping the balloon string. A pink balloon floated into the sky, like the hope I'd lost years ago. Joe glanced at Ethan, who was playing with Rosie nearby, then lowered his voice. I'm here to apologize. The company didn't go bankrupt because a poor management kit was sabotaged. My head spun, and the trash bag slipped from my hand. What are you saying? Emily's family did it, Joe said, his voice trembling. They wanted to monopolize New York's landscaping market. Our company had just landed a project with Great Technologies Fence Company. Emily's family was afraid we'd steal their business, so they faked financial loopholes and hired someone to steal our core designs. I barely heard the rest. My ears rang with a buzzing sound. My past suffering hadn't been an accident, it had been a carefully planned plot. I remembered eating stale bread in the subway, huddling in McDonald's to stay warm. The bad luck I'd endured had been someone else's whim. Then, the wallet and ID I lost were those they're doing too. I grabbed Joe's arm, my knuckles white. Joe nodded. Yes, they were afraid you'd go to the police or ask Ethan for help, so they had someone steal your things, leaving you with no way to prove your identity. I was cowardly back then, and I took their hush money and kept quiet. I've felt guilty all these years. When I saw the news about your studio and your marriage to Ethan, I finally worked up the courage to tell you the truth. I felt cold all over, even my breath hurting. Just then, Ethan walked over. He must have noticed my pale face. He handed Rosie to the nanny, then walked over to me. What's wrong, Lena? Joe looked at Ethan, quickly saying, Mr. Ethan, about what happened back then. I know. Ethan cut him off, his voice calm but firm. I whipped around to look at him. You knew this whole time. Ethan's eyes were filled with tenderness as he took my cold hands. I found out after we got together, when I was looking into Emily. I was scared telling you would break you, scared you'd think I was in on it with her. I already had my lawyer gather evidence Emily's family's company was sued last year for monopolization and commercial fraud. It's bankrupt now. Why didn't you tell me? Tears spilled down my cheeks, not from anger, but from heartache. Heartache for the girl who'd wandered the streets with no hope, and heartache that Ethan had carried this alone. I wanted to wait until you were ready, Ethan said, pulling me into his arms. His heartbeat was steady, like a shelter around me. I knew you weren't the kind to let the past break you, but I hated the thought of you hurting all over again. I wanted you to have happiness first. Hadn't let you decide if you wanted to dig up the past. I didn't want those people to ruin the life we'd built. Old Joe sighed beside us. Mr. Ethan, I'm sorry for what I did to Ms. Lena. Sorry for what I did to the company. I came today not just to apologize. I want to return the hush money I took. It's the least I can do to make up for it. Ethan shook his head for me. Keep the money. Coming to tell her the truth is enough. He looked down at me. Lena, whatever you want to do, we'll do it. I leaned against his chest, my tears slowing. I thought of the days I'd tended wild roses in Central Park. The nights we'd built trellises by streetlight, the sound of Rosie's laughter as she chased butterflies. The pain was real, but so was the life we'd made. I don't want to pursue it anymore, I said, looking up at Ethan. They already paid for what they did. Right now, I have you, Rosie, the garden, and the studio. That's all that matters. Old Joe let out a relieved breath. He mumbled another apology, then left. Ethan held me, pressing a kiss to my forehead. Are you really okay? I nodded, pointing to the wild roses in the flower bed. Look, they grew in cracks, got beaten by wind and rain, but they still bloom, right? I'm the same way, Ethan smiled. He took my hand and led me over to Rosie. She was digging in the dirt with a small trowel. When she saw us, she held up a tiny daisy. Mommy, look, a flower. I knelt down, tucking the daisy behind her ear. It's beautiful. You know what, Rosie? Flowers bloom so beautifully because they're not afraid of wind or rain. No matter how hard things get, they keep growing. Rosie nodded, though her eyes were wide with confusion. She threw her arms around my neck. I want to be like a flower too. Good, I said, hugging her. I looked up at Ethan, and he was smiling down at us, eyes soft with love. The sunset painted the garden gold. The wind carried the scent of flowers, like it was whispering the story of how far we'd come. Later that night, after Rosie fell asleep, Ethan and I sat on the garden swing. He handed me a mug of hot cocoa, and the warmth seeped into my hands. I have one more thing to tell you, Ethan said suddenly. When I first saw you in Central Park, it wasn't a coincidence. I'd just had a fight with Emily, and I was out walking to clear my head. Then I saw you watering those wild roses. You looked so alive. I had someone look into you, found out you were struggling. That's why I offered you the gardener job. I looked at him, my chest feeling warm and tight. You wanted to help me even then? I did, Ethan nodded. Back then, I didn't know about the mess with Emily's family and your company. I just thought you deserved better than sleeping on the streets. Then I fell for you, and when I found out the truth, I hated that anyone had ever hurt you. I wanted to give you everything to make up for it. I leaned my head on his shoulder, holding the hot cocoa tight. I don't need everything. I just need you. The wind rustled through the garden, and petals from the wild roses drifted down, landing at our feet. I thought back to that first night on Fifth Avenue within's cold glare, the squashed salad on the ground, the way I'd felt so small and alone. From ashes to stardust, from despair to love turns out. Every twist and turn had led me here. Life might throw storms, might plant thorns in your path. But if you hold on to the people you love and hold on to yourself, you'll bloom, just like the wild roses. And I knew Ethan, Rosie, and I would keep blooming, together, in our little garden, for years to come. And that's where the story ends. If you'd like to hear more stories, follow me and head to my homepage to find ones you love. There's always a story that will resonate with you. See you in the next episode.